Teddy Roosevelt himself talked about this. African Americans, quote, were a perfectly stupid race that could never rise to a very high plane. You take those guys at the beginning of the century and you go all the way to today, Al Gore. What are you if you don't believe in global warming? I mean, besides right. You're a Holocaust denier. Unless you agree with them and their solutions, you will be destroyed. And with global warming, what did they do? If they can't nudge you into it, if they can't propaganda you into it, if they can't scare you into it, they just take your choices away. You probably know that we are not going to have incandescent light bulbs in the United States in 2012. I hate fluorescent lights almost as much as Woodrow Wilson. By 2012, you're not going to be able to buy them. Now, did you agree to that? Did the free market agree to that? No. The free market likes incandescent light bulbs, but the government is the answer. You're too stupid. You'd keep buying them. So they just took them away. Yeah. By the way, that wasn't Barack Obama that did that. That's the progressive side of George W. Bush. He did it over a Christmas holiday. So, I said at the beginning of the program that we would go from fries to riots. Friots. Okay? We're at Kids Meds. Well, Cass Sunstein wrote the book, Nudge. And it is behavioral psychology. And the ideas in it are being heavily used by the president and the first lady. I mean, he's the regulatory czar. But Cass didn't write this book alone. Here it is. In fact, the first name on the book is Richard Thaler. Thaler has just met with British Prime Minister David Cameron. And it was more than just a meeting, really. Cameron thinks so highly of the ideas in this book, Nudge, that he has made the book required reading for all shadow cabinet members who call themselves the Nudge Team. Among their task, encourage people to quit smoking and to eat more healthily without having to implement rules. Convince them to do it. They're dumb. But this isn't the first dabbling in behavioral psychology for Cameron. He basically lifted all of the campaign slogans from Obama's 2008 campaign. Are you ready for change? Yes, change. A year for change. But different kind of change, I think, than what we have over here, or is it? I know the people in England who may be watching me now, they want to change a lot, yeah. I think people in England are kind of like us, though. They just want to survive. They want to make massive cuts. Nobody wants to change, but they're willing to if it means their country is going to survive. But how do they cut? Because their government spent too much. How do they do that? They have too many entitlements. How do they do that? Businesses are too heavily regulated. Government health care is too expensive. It's collapsing. Patients over there are drinking water from plants. Too much spending, too much regulation, government health care, too many entitlements. Wait a minute, are any of these things sounding familiar? Those are all the things that Barack Obama is pushing us into while the rest of the world is trying to get out of it. Isn't that weird? Do you remember Donald Berwick? His new chief of Medicaid and Medicare services here in the U.S. He said he was in love with Britain's health care. But he also said this. Listen.
Berwick knows that politicians and most of his colleagues say that a single health care system is a non-starter in the U.S. They argue that Americans with health insurance won't go for limits on where or when they can get care. Berwick points to a Dartmouth College study 2 years ago that says the best quality care is in areas with a minimal number of hospitals, labs, and doctors.
If as a country you could sort of wake up and give up this belief that more is better, we would have a rational supply of care exactly where we need it and not be wasting on oversupply. These are answers. They're just not answers we're willing to swallow quite yet as a country.
Can I tell you something? He is so right. I know I was out in Wyoming and Idaho and Alaska the other day, and I thought, man, if I got a big problem, I hope I can go to the hospital here, maybe in Montana. We are running into the fire that the people in England are trying to escape out of. It's becoming more and more clear that massive government doesn't work. So why are we running towards it? For us to get from French fries to riots, you have to understand that it always begins with a nudge. But that's not where it ends. You see, we have seen them nudge before. We've seen, here's Acorn. They're nudging the banks to give more loans. We've seen SEIU nudging bank executives right on the lawn, trapping a son inside. And when the nudge doesn't work, then you'll see this from SEIU. A nudge becomes a shove. The First Lady has started the nudge on hamburgers and French fries. There's an ad that is also nudging. But what happens when that nudge doesn't take it far enough to where the non-Homer Simpsons, the people who are smarter than you and me, the mea quimbis, and the special interest Mr. Burns decide the nudge hasn't taken Homer and his family far enough? Well, that's when Homer starts to feel not a nudge, but a shove. And that's where we start to go to the fryattes. You're beginning to see this now in Europe, and most recently in the UK. I'll show that to you next. There are two seemingly non-story stories in the news today. Children's cold medicine may now need a prescription. We're talking about Tylenol. And Michelle Obama would like to make carrots and apple slices the default option on menus. You'll have to ask for fries. It won't come with fries. She wants to make fish and chips into fish and carrots, or fish and apples. Now, all the media is doing today is repeating these stories without saying what they mean. And here's what they mean. We are on an extraordinarily dangerous path because of Cass Sunstein. I've told you for a long time, and, I get calls now from senators in Washington who are like, I think you might be right about this. Really? Thank you for calling, Senator. Cass Sunstein, I've told you, is the most dangerous man in America. Why? Because he's our regulatory czar. When they pass a 2,500-page bill and nobody knows what is in it, it needs somebody to write the regulations. It's this guy. And this guy believes, and you can read about it in his book, Nudge, instead of giving people maximum freedom and the ability to make real choices for themselves, he believes there's too many choices, too much information available. It leaves people confused, unable to make good decisions. Why? Because, using his words, people are like Homer Simpson. Well, are you like Homer Simpson? People like him are going to be exceptionally dangerous when what happens in Europe, or is happening now in Europe, starts to come to our shores. On the Business Insider, there was a story that was on what's going on in Europe. There's a chart that breaks down where the overwhelming majority of riots and attacks are originating from. Because, I don't know if you saw this, there are attacks. Islamicists, 89 attacks. Separatists, 268 attacks. Left wing, I've seen the violence, 39 attacks. Right wing, 1. Okay, we get this. These are people who just want to separate from the country. And these are communist. Okay. The reason? Well, for the left wing, I can give you the reason. People have become dependent on welfare and entitlement programs, and sudden and massive financial cuts have to be made in order to save the country, and it caused a shock to the system. People felt lied to. Most people, they're not in with the left wing. They're not communists. But the communists have been saying, on Cloward and Piven, collapse the darn thing. They feel lied to as well because their politicians lied to them and said, hey, did you notice Bill Maher on Leno last night, who called the president I can't even say a bad word. Why did he say that? Because he's not left enough. That's what this is. The left coming out and saying, our government isn't left enough. They feel lied to. They were promised that they could spend and spend and spend, and they did so without any consequences. Some of them knew what they were doing. Well, the unions are part of it, and the unions don't want to let go of their bloated pensions. The state's now running out of cash. Cloward and Piven, calling Cloward and Piven, and the people stopped getting their handouts. Well, just this past weekend, there was rioting again in Greece. They're angry at the austerity measures. Now, which countries have the most violence? The ones that are in the worst shape. Spain and Greece. But there's more to come. Because now it's coming to, what was the country that just had Cass Sunstein's co-author of Nudge? Oh yeah, England. England. The unions in England are starting to call for get out in the streets. It just depends on how bad the government is screwed up. And when people figure out how bad things are, it starts to come to the surface. In America, we know that a lot of it is bad. But a lot of people in America still don't believe that unrest could come to our shores, that America will ever change. You just wait till the federal government starts doing what California did last year and hand out IOUs instead of tax refunds. And actually, that will never happen. Because there's good news and bad news on this one. The good news is the federal government will never give you an IOU. Ever. Ever. The bad news is why? Because they have a printing press and they'll just print more money. I mean, why would you give somebody a worthless piece of paper that says IOU on it when they can just give you a worthless piece of paper that says In God We Trust on it? America, you're going to be presented with a choice. The Cass Sunstein crowd will tell you that the free market has failed, that we need administrators and regulations to make sure it never ever happens again. Regulators because people are greedy or they're like Homer Simpson, and the government is the answer. They'll want to hold your hand, redistribute the wealth. And they're going to do it all around the globe because remember, this now is a global community. We're all interconnected. Workers of the world unite. That's not just a slogan anymore. Gee, where did I hear that? Where did I hear that?
Workers of the world unite? It's not just a slogan anymore. It's a way we're going to have to do our work.
That's right. And you'll be nudged into it. And here's something extra spooky. It's not just SEIU, AFL-CIO. Here's Richard Trumka speaking to the Socialist Party in Canada.
So how are we going to achieve a new global economic order? One that puts the needs and rights of workers front and center. And our efforts must be coordinated by strengthening the Council of Global Unions, which can help us ensure ongoing strategic planning and concentrated coordination, particularly with the Global Union Federation. By strengthening our global trade union movement, we can recover from the crisis, rebalance inequities in our financial system so that workers can go about rebuilding our lives.
How do they do that when somebody in China is making 50 cents a day? How does a union, a global union, do that? Especially if you're the country on the decline. Why wouldn't you just throw in with the other countries where there's nothing but growth? The media is not going to give you the truth on this nudge towards bigger government and eventually global government, but I will. We've taken it now from French fries to global government. French fries to medicine to global government. But where do you go from here? How do you get to riots? How do you get there? Well, you get there from collapsing the system, which will nudge you into a global government. And if that's not enough, or maybe to help the system collapse, you have riots. We'll show you that piece next.
Yeah. Homer Simpson, all he wants is a donut. Yeah. You gotta be smarter than that.
2 years ago, if I would have said Cloward and Piven, would you have known who I was talking about? Do you now? No one 2 years ago wanted to believe that there is a philosophy to intentionally collapse our system. Well, the people who wanted to do it are right here. Cloward, Piven. Richard Cloward, Francis Fox Piven. They were Columbia University professors.